One of the old stuff was about spoofing. I mean, in terms of the God issues and the massive price manipulation, spoofing was sort of like rinky-dink. It didn't really mean that much. Now you're talking about racketeering, criminal enterprise. You know, this is a big, big deal. And I think what's coming up next is...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the special interview. Today we have a returning guest to the show, Bill Murphy. Bill is chairman of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA, located at gata.org. Bill's relentless in his fight and exposure for market manipulations and to expose the precious metals price suppression that is actively being engaged upon. And we have some very important updates today to talk about that specifically. Bill, I'd like to thank you for joining us today on Silver Doctors.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Thanks for thinking of me.
Now, Bill, let me set the stage here for you. Last week was a very interesting week, in my opinion, because, you know, gold and silver were in their second weeks of consolidation, if we want to call it that. And one of the things I noticed was there was a lot of just cutthroat back and forth between the analysts, where you have people that are adamant about no manipulation at all, and then you have people that are adamant about that there is manipulation. And I looked at that as a sign of a good thing, almost like the Bulls versus the Bears. But I noticed on your website last week you had an update that Chris Powell wrote about updating the status on Congressman Mooney's pressuring of both the Fed and Congress as well. And I find it interesting as a side note that nobody really says, oh, well, this guy's crazy trying to call out the Fed for manipulation. But here's my question to you. Why is the manipulation debate still not settled? Why is there so much back and forth, especially in light with what we're about to talk about, which just unfolded yesterday, Bill?
Well, it's about the rich and powerful. I mean, it's all the money and power in the world that is behind this, and they're doing it. And it's, you know, whether it's the press, the financial markets, that's the mainstream world. Nobody wants to take these people on, and that's why it's gone. That's why God has been at this for 20 years, trying to expose this stuff, and it's clear as can be, and the evidence is there, and that's what Mooney's trying to get, you know, from Washington, and it's very difficult because nobody will discuss it. You get some, you know, God is not allowed to be mentioned in most circles.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I find it interesting because, you know, just after what broke yesterday, the analysts that are adamant that there's no manipulation have fallen silent since then.
They sure have.
Yeah, but let's get into that, Bill. So yesterday, breaking, the Department of Justice unsealed indictments for two traders and one former trader, and you know, they're charged with criminal, conspiring, racketeering. I think the exact phrase is from the Department of Justice is 3 traders charged with criminal racketeering. Now, what is your thoughts on this latest set of indictments from the Department of Justice? What is going on with that, and what is your opinion of that?
Well, first of all, I've never seen such a diatribe from a mainstream organization in all my life. The verbiage that you're talking about, you know, racketeering, criminal enterprise, J.P. Morgan, and I think it's a big deal. And you know, they say this has been going on for a decade. Of course, we know it's been going on even longer than that. But a decade, what have these people been doing? You know, it's most obvious rigging of all time, and God has reported on it for years, and I write about it in my commentary. And so the question, what's going on here? And that's fascinating. Why now and why this? And I think there's 2 factions in the government. One is the little guys and all the people collecting all the evidence, the lawyers, investigators, and it's got so overwhelming that they realize if they didn't come out with something, they're at risk for not doing something about it. Then you've got the really higher ups who organize what I call the gold cartel and the operation of price suppression in general. And you know, they're going, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And of course, there's different trading organizations all over the place. I mean, J.B. Diamond is even in that, said years ago that they have a $2 trillion derivative operation, secretive, in Florida. That's for the top guy at JPM. So I think the thing is sort of blowing up. I think you can compare it a little bit to like Watergate in a certain way, in the sense of the Justice Department was involved in that to some degree, and it blew up, and eventually they turned on each other. So it's an incredible situation. It's a big, big deal in the sense that something like that could come out publicly. I mean, can you imagine the lawsuits and your witness is the Justice Department?
Yes.
You know, and of course the word conspiracy is used all over the place because that's what it is. And of course, half of business operations are conspiracy. That's why J.P. Morgan was fined $35 billion a few years ago for rigging 3 and 4 markets, different commodities markets. There's no, it's the way it is.
Yes, and some people think that if they're charging these traders, why is the price of gold just barely over $1,500? This isn't something that's going to change the world tomorrow. Do you see this something that's going to be drawn out over years? Or what would you say to the people that say, well, if all these manipulations are getting exposed, why isn't the price of gold or silver moving right now?
Well, it has. It's moved 300. It moved at the end of May through now. And that's, after Deutsche Bank had this problem, they're restructuring, and the question about their custodial accounts. It is all blowing up as we speak. It's just quite, look, this investigation, how long has it taken to become in the public domain? And I think the physical market's drying up. Everybody wants gold and silver because of the interest rate situation and concerns over so many issues. And after all these years, gold finally blew out of its containment, 6-year containment 3-4 months ago. Silver is following suit. The physical people are going after the physical market, and I think that's going to be the story. One of the keys to buying gold and silver is to understand, or I should say the reasons, is how undervalued they are because they've been artificially suppressed all these years. This is what's going to come to light, and they're going to go, oh my goodness. And it's going to be a major positive issue factor in the gold and silver markets in the months and years ahead. What we got yesterday was the very beginning, and everyone's trying to keep it quiet like they always do. But it's not going to stay quiet because the gold and silver markets are going to take off. And naturally, when the news comes out, the bad guys, the gold cartels, I call, they're not going to let gold explode on news like that. The same day as the oil attacks, had to be dealt with. So yesterday was something else.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's kind of seems like what I'm hearing is that it's a progression, that there's various things that have been building up over time, and now it's just starting to overwhelm the gold cartel. Is that what I'm hearing you say,
yeah.
Bill?
Yes, the physical market's drying up on them after all these years. They don't have the ammo that they had all that time. And now you've got stories like this. I mean, a lot of these traders and whoever's involved in this, they've got to be looking cross-eyed themselves. As much as they think some of them are protected, they may not be. A lot of the people in Watergate thought they were protected no matter what. Look what happened.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, I also find the timing interesting about this because on the one hand, we have, as you said, there's this breaking development with the attacks in the oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. Plus, there's the Fed where everybody's going to be focused on this week. And I just like to bring up a side note. I'm not sure if you're aware of just today, you brought up interest rates. The Fed has just engaged in its first overnight repo agreement in a decade. And I'm reading a direct quote from the New York Fed right now. And it says, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York will conduct an overnight repurchase agreement operation from 9:30 a.m. to 9:45 a.m. today, September 17th, in order to help maintain the federal funds rate within the target range of 2 to 2.25%. So that just goes to show you that they are desperate to keep these rates down. And that also goes to show you that, well, the Fed is in there manipulating the interest rate market 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're instantly acting as soon as there's some sort of an issue. Or am I thinking about this wrong, Bill?
You're right on the money. I mean, there's more manipulation than anybody can really understand or appreciate. It's the way things are. And that's what God has been trying to expose for 20 years. And it's finally coming to light in the gold and silver markets. My colleague, Chris Powell, does a fantastic job, said many years ago that the United States would rather reveal our nuclear secrets than what they're doing in the gold market. That's how big a deal it is. And that is what is coming to light.
So what will you be looking to come out of this, or are you looking ahead of this, or like for the rest of the year, if you're looking at the manipulation cases and what the Department of Justice is doing, what are some of the things that you're going to be looking out for as the months draw out here? Because last year it seems like with a couple of the traders previously, these are three new traders, but with a couple of the traders previously, sentencing kept being delayed because they kept having to continue their investigation. Are you looking for a lot of this to kind of get stonewalled and delay? What are some of the things you're going to be looking at that we're going to actually have progress here?
Well, two things. One, the old stuff was about spoofing. I mean, in terms of the God issues and the massive price manipulation, spoofing was sort of like rinky-dink. It didn't really mean that much. Now you're talking about racketeering, criminal enterprise. You know, this is a big, big deal. And I think what's coming up next is some of the higher ups getting exposed. I think some of the people are going to start turning on each other. Again, I refer to Watergate once again, what happened. And I think that's what's coming out. And the question is, how is it all dealt with by the real higher ups who were involved in with the gold cartel operations with, you know, honestly, the Fed and the Treasury. It's weird, but that's the way it is. And stranger things have happened, and it's taken a long time, but I think it's going to progress, especially as the physical market continues to dry up on the bad guys. It takes away their ammo to keep the prices down, and all of a sudden, one of these days, gold and silver are going to explode, and especially silver because it's been so suppressed. And that's when many more questions are going to come to the surface.
Now, what you just said makes me think about a little analogy. It makes me think that in the past, when the Department of Justice is going after the spoofers, basically what they're doing is they're going after the symptoms of the disease. But now it sounds like they're actually targeting the disease itself, which is the systemic criminal racketeering and corruption at the higher levels. Is that what I'm hearing you say there, Bill?
Yes. How can the higher ups at JP Morgan for a decade not know what's going on? That's inconceivable. What's the matter with these people? And I think that's where the obvious investigation is going to lead to. What were these people doing? And, you know, and how far up does it go?
Moving on a little bit to silver, I would like to talk about silver and get an update from you. You know, at the end of May, silver was sitting at like $14, call it $14.50. And then we had the run up to above 1950. I think 1975 was the high. Then we know what happened on September 5th. However, a couple things I want to bring about that and then get an update from you on the silver market is that move in silver took place over 3 months and it was 30%. Now, what we've seen in yield on the 10-year note has been also a 30% move in just 2 weeks. And one of the suspicions of mine has been that the Exchange Stabilization Fund has been in there selling a lot of 10-year notes to ramp yield to get prices of gold and silver back down as they were starting to get out of hand. So just because, you know, the 10-year yield moved in just 2 weeks. We went from September 5th at a level of, I think, 1.42, and then I think we got above 1.9 on the yield. So I guess just my question when it comes to this explosiveness, I don't think we have seen the explosiveness just from that 30% move over 3 months. Was that the explosiveness, or are you talking about something else that's coming to the silver markets?
No, much bigger than that. That was rinky-dink. I mean, it's using the same word again, but, you know, of course, the chart pattern in silver was like a rocket ship. It was straight up, and any manipulation or no, there needs to be some sort of setback. And so what we've seen so far is pretty much appropriate in the way normal markets are. And, you know, silver stopped around 1735, 1740, where it should have, and back, you know, challenging 18 again. The real explosion, in my opinion, I've said this for years, I think a couple of times in your show, is going to come when silver takes out 21. And then I think you're going to have a rocket ship move. And one of my favorite ways to analyze it is Newton's law of equal and opposite reactions. It's been so bad for so long, the worst market I can ever imagine, and it's going to be the best, and it's going to be absolutely wild. All of a sudden, the physical supply will dry up. There'll be a panic by industrial users to secure supply, and then you're going to see silver make that move towards $100 an ounce.
Yes. I would agree with you in that I think that silver is the thing that they fear the most because it has been held back the most. I haven't done the calculation in a while, and certainly not since gold's broken above 15 and palladium's at new record highs and platinum's finally catching a bid. But it just amazes me that you can take the average price of those three metals at the time, and it was over $1,000. The average price for gold, platinum, and palladium is probably like $1,250 now or somewhere around there. But if you average all four precious metals and include silver in it, the average is still somewhere north of $750 for 1 ounce of precious metal. And we have silver sitting here at $18. That just speaks volume to me with just how much they do fear silver, because as I like to think of it, where nations stockpile gold, I think that silver is the power and the money of the people. Does that logic make sense there, which why they've been so heavy-handed on it?
Yeah, I think they're petrified of losing control of the silver market. And that's why the open interest is so high on the COMEX. It's only 30,000 contracts off its all-time high, and that's still 30,000 contracts higher than an all-time high of 3 years ago. So they're going all out in the paper market to stop it, and they're gradually losing control. And that's what we've seen, why the price suddenly started to act the way it has. And it's just a matter of time now before it goes nuts. And, silver, of course, gold's a big deal in terms of the monetary world, and silver is too, but it's also, used in so much industry. And they have to have it no matter what price it is. And they've been very complacent these past years because it's been a non-issue. All of a sudden, it's going to become a major issue, and that's when the excitement really kicks in.
Now, shifting a little bit to gold has been holding in. I would say that gold is building a nice base at 1,500. We're building some nice support here. And, even aside from the manipulation that's being exposed right now, one of the things that I've been talking about for the past couple weeks is I really do think that in addition to the cartel losing control, that the fundamental factors right now are just overwhelming these markets. And we see it all around us. I'm looking that the fear trade is on. I'm looking that an inflation hedge is on. I'm looking that de-dollarization is on. I'm looking that people see a massive run in the stock market artificially induced for 10 years. So they're looking for wealth preservation at this point. There's also speculation going on. So we know there's that. So I'm just seeing, so many fundamental factors that, in my opinion, are just exerting themselves onto these markets right now. Do you think that the fundamentals are starting to finally come back into these markets, and how much of an effect are they having, and how much are you looking at the technicals right now with gold?
Well, I agree with most of what you said, and in the sense of its basing, and of course, I love to use the same term. The fear trade's been a big deal, and of course, the low interest rates is a mega deal. Negative interest rates. The reasons to own gold and silver are off the charts, and it's only the gold cartel that's prevented it from continuing to move higher. And they're in there doing their thing, and we're used to that. So the key for me is that they finally, after all these years, are losing control of the physical supply issue. So they can attack like they've just done now, but they can't sustain it, if I'm correct anyway. And so you're going to see gold and silver prices soar at some point in the near future. I mean, as you just said, all the fundamental reasons for them to go higher are all there. That's why you have so many big names in the hedge fund world, like my old friend Ray Dalio and Paul Tudor Jones, who I met once, and these big name guys. They're all coming out advocating gold, and there's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It almost sounds like, the gold cartel is going to be drowning in a sea of justice, if I could call it that. Does that sound accurate?
Can't have it to a nicer group of guys.
Nice. Shifting to the dollar, because I do want to get your opinion on the dollar too, Bill. Because since the last time we spoke, it's been a few months. And since then, I mean, President Trump has just been back and forth on the dollar. But for the past 2 months, he's just been talking about the dollar is very strong. The dollar is very strong. Just yesterday, it came out saying the dollar is very strong and it's hurting our exports. In addition, very adamant about the Fed needs to lower interest rates. And on top of that, looking at the Fed, Jerome Powell has said that the Fed needs to ensure that they can sustain the expansion. I think the exact words he used was, we need to sustain this expansion. So my question to you is, what is your outlook for the dollar right now? And do you see a hit or even a possible devaluation coming to the U.S. dollar, Bill?
Well, I'm not the expert on the dollar, that's for sure. I've just got the 2-cent opinion here, but it's what I have noticed is that gold has moved up independent of the dollar, which is quite interesting, with other factors taking over. And I know that it's way up there. We know what the president wants, and we know what I think our interest rate situation is going to be. So the downside potential is much greater than the upside. Let's put it that way. And I think that the likelihood of the dollar coming down is quite high.
Mm-hmm. And as far as interest rates, you are also looking for the Fed to continue on their rate cutting path, and possibly, a lot of people are saying that this morning is the first. Zero Hedge is reporting that this morning is the first salvo of QE, but it could also be argued that they've been purchasing bonds for a few weeks now because their balance sheet has risen. So is that still your outlook? Are you also, in addition to looking for the dollar to come down, are you looking for interest rates to go down and the Fed to get back to the money printing?
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's why the big money is coming into gold and silver, for those reasons, because they're petrified of the debt situation in the U.S. What are they going to do? And they've got to stimulate. They've got to keep interest rates down, as low as possible. And, you got the president jumping up and down all the time about the Fed. And no matter what you say, it has to put some pressure on the Fed. I mean, they may not admit it, but what's going on behind the scenes? So I think the setup for gold and silver is extraordinary.
In addition to that, and it's not just here, because in addition to that, last week, or was it 2 weeks ago now? I think it was last week, Mario Draghi came out and they're going to restart QE again. And, they're going to get back into all these money printing, fiat currency negative actions that they've been taking. So it's basically around the world, and it makes perfect sense why central banks around the world have been stockpiling gold, because it's all the currencies that are in what people like to call a race to the bottom. Am I thinking about that correctly, Bill?
Race to the bottom it is. And that's the reason we've got the interest rate situation coming in the United States, because we pretty much have no choice.
Now, we have had a nice run here in the past few months. So I just want to get your thoughts on what are you looking at as we coming into the rest of the year for gold and silver? Are you looking at just consolidation here for the next couple of months? Are you looking for another breakout before the end of the year? Do you have any times? Do you have any targets, or what is Bill Murphy looking at right now in the months ahead?
I'm just one man's opinion, but I'll be surprised if both don't explode by the end of the year. And they're going to go up higher and faster than most people think.
GATA has an investment conference coming up. Is that right, Bill?
No, we'll be doing some work speaking at the New Orleans Investment Conference in early November. Brian Lundeen does a great job, and look forward to seeing my buddy Chris there. And we're doing different stuff on the internet and doing as much as we can to get exposure to what's going to eventually be a big scandal. And we said we've worked on it for 2 decades, so
yes.
Finally see it pay off a little bit.
And do you expect there will be a lot more talk about active suppression or manipulation this year as opposed to in prior events?
Probably not. I mean,
No?
Just goes right into the dumpster. I mean, it's very few people have given God the time of day.
Now, Bill, in addition to your work at GATA, you also run the Metropole Cafe. Could you explain to our listeners and our viewers a little bit about what you do over there, please?
Well, I write about the gold and silver markets, and the financial markets are covered, and people can sign up for a 2-week free trial at metropolecafe.com. And then, of course, my buddy Chris Powell does a great job at GATA.org, and they can sign up and get on his list at any time. So we're still out there fighting a good fight.
For some reason, it just boggles the mind how it's also taboo for some reason, when it's just, out there, the evidence is clear if people are just willing to look at it. And people in our own government, such as Mooney, they're actively trying to engage in these things, and it still just gets turned a blind eye to it, it seems almost.
Look at the CFTC. I mean, what have they been doing all these years? This is what the Justice Department said. That's supposed to be the CFTC doing that. That's their job. I still have to wonder about a guy who I met many years ago, is one of our only supporters, and in a way was Bart Chilton. And what happened to him? He's dead.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Now, and then just final question. I asked about your outlook for gold and silver, just in general, in the economy or in the markets or with politics or geopolitics. What is on your radar right now when you're thinking about all the different news that's been unfolding lately? What are some of the things that you've been thinking about most, and what are some of the things that you could think could have an effect on the markets? Like, for example, we've gone from a lot of trade war rhetoric to now there's actual a lot of real war rhetoric with what's going on in the Middle East. Is that something that's concerning you, and how would that tie into the metals here?
Well, from my standpoint, geopolitical stuff doesn't last too long. 9/11 was an exception, but you get a brief flurry and then it fades into oblivion, the prices go back, and then the gold cartel makes sure it does because they don't want it to be a big deal. Should there be more problems in the Middle East and oil really takes off, I mean, the price of oil right now, where it was, what, 5 months ago, a year and a half ago, it's no big deal. It takes off another $20, $25, and with all these concerns we have in the U.S., about what's going on, the consumer and all this kind of stuff, it can be that could end up to be a big deal.
Bill Murphy, I'd like to thank you for joining us today on Silver Doctors.
Thank you. Good to be here, Paul.